It is rather a dysfunction of the brain, which may be due to hormonal problems or some sort of mental illness or trauma suffered earlier in life. You know, it could be a lot of reasons for it. Or perhaps, and I think this is the most common, it could also be a symptom of spiritual despair.
A symptom of spiritual despair. So like the idea is that if this asexual person just found God and understood religion, then they would suddenly start having sexual urges to other people. So essentially religion makes you horny. Is that, you know, that might be the case for Matt Walsh. I don't know. I mean, considering what we hear going on in the Catholic Church and whatnot, I don't know, you might actually be correct. So in keeping up with the asexuality, aromantic, and everything else in between line of thought that we've had, I know we have a lot of Jaden Animations fans that came in here. Still trying to ride the wave of all you fun people who have found out about me and have enjoyed my content and expressed so in a lot of the comments. I really appreciate that. I have read them, even if I haven't engaged with all of them. This absolute troglodyte, this reprehensible piece of garbage, Matt Walsh, that advocates outwardly, openly, full-throatedly for the abuse of kids, has decided to give his thoughts on somebody who is biromantic and asexual. Apparently, a Disney executive claims to be that. I, for one, don't care. My immediate thought when seeing this video is, who cares? Why should I care? So obviously this is in the wake of the Florida bill, what's been called the Don't Say Gay bill, that makes it difficult for teachers to, in a very sterile clinical setting, in very simplified terms, explain basic biology and basic sociology to children. And they do it in ways that are age appropriate. It's very easy to do. For instance, you got a small kid and they're like, yo, why does Johnny have two moms? It's like, well, oh, you have a mommy and a daddy, but Johnny has two mommies because they love each other. And that's okay because we are human beings and we're not hateful like Matt Walsh. That is very simple. Very, very simple. It's so easy. It's so easy to do this. But for some reason, as soon as conservatives think of children, they think of sex. So because of that, whenever these conversations are had, they immediately jump to that point and accuse the left of doing what they do, which is attempting to indoctrinate children with counterfactual, unscientific, and pro-child abuse ideology. And it's borne out in the data. You don't have to take my word for it. It's borne out in the data. But anyway, here's Matt Walsh talking about it. Let's go. I'm excited.
A Disney executive producer named LaToya Raveneau has found her own way into the club, and it's pretty interesting. Listen to this.
Into the club? What does this mean?
I identify as like a biromantic asexual. I've had a lot of learning and growing about myself this year, kind of facilitated by how comfortable I felt on the Proud Family and with my immediate team at Disney TVA.
On the Proud Family?
And so it's just sort
that's
of
a good
like
show.
This creative dissonance between my personal experience.
So Matt Walsh probably doesn't like the Proud Family because it features primarily black people in it, and having a show that is marketed to children that has a bunch of black people in it, to him would be degeneracy and pushing an agenda on kids, a woke show, some may say. So this Disney executive claims to be a biromantic asexual person. Biromantic meaning that they can be romantically interested in essentially any gender, but bi meaning two usually refers to the binary genders of a man and a woman. So that person can be romantically attracted to those people. They can have romantic engagements with those people. The asexual part meaning that they don't have a desire for sexual engagements. If they're finding these people to be romantically interested in, they will not have a desire for a sexual engagement with that person. That's all that means. Very simple, very easy to understand. Biromantic means this person can love man, woman, anybody else. Asexual means they don't want to do icky things with those people. I'm trying to simplify it so that the two brain cells that work overtime to stay within Matt Walsh's skull can kind of comprehend it. I know that basic sociological concepts and basic biology are really difficult for conservatives. I'm trying to help him out. It's a good faith effort, in my opinion.
A biromantic asexual.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's break this down.
Okay.
An asexual is somebody who supposedly doesn't experience any sexual attraction at all to anyone.
I'm pretty sure this is not even accurate. Asexuality, I'm pretty sure, is defined as not having a desire for sexual engagements with people. Asexuality is the lack of sexual attraction to others or lower absent interest in or desire for sexual activity. So those are two different things. To have a sexual attraction or interest in others or a lower absent interest is different from having that low or no desire in sexual activity. Attraction and activity are different. It may be considered a sexual orientation or the lack thereof. It may also be categorized more widely broadly to include a broad spectrum of asexual sub-identities. So we're already starting off with a not so great definition. And if you're trying to teach people what these things mean, you're not doing a good job.
The problem with that identification is that, first of all, if it's true that somebody experiences no sexual attraction at all, then it makes absolutely no sense to include them in the LGBT community, given that this is a community which is literally defined by its various sexual attractions.
No, you're a fucking stupid moron. You've got no idea what you're talking about. The reason why LGBTQIA+, the A there, stands for asexual is because asexuality is the lack of a sexuality. That might sound contradictory, but let me explain. Sexualities come in a variety of different spectrums. The reason why the asexual people are included in that is, one, because it's not always the total lack of a sexuality. That's a very simplified version of it. People have a wide range of experiences with being asexual. It's not, oh, I literally never feel any sexual desire ever. Some people who are, demisexual, require a very strong romantic connection to a person in order to then feel a sexual desire to them. That is in the asexual spectrum. But obviously, this is too much for his tiny little brain. There's no way he could possibly comprehend that very simple idea. So as such, another reason why asexual people are included in the LGBTQIA+ community is because of the addition to being ace as a non-heteronormative thing. So the expectation for society, at least what Matt Walsh wants to be the case, is that everybody's straight, heterosexual, and everybody is reproducing for the sake of, they only engage in sex for the sake of procreation and blah, 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 blah. To be asexual is not within that norm. And by norm, I mean not what is expected by most people. And as such, these people, asexual people, experience a lot of discrimination, a lot of oppression based on that identity. And that oppression, those experiences are also shared by a lot of other people in the LGBTQIA+ community. So not only is asexuality definitionally still included in the broad umbrella of sexualities, but it's also included because there is a shared struggle between asexual people and everybody else in that community.
Putting an asexual person in the LGBT camp, it's like having a club for bird watchers, and also including people who have absolutely no interest in bird watching. These are people who do not want to partake in the very thing that defines the club.
No. The idea that the LGBTQIA+ community is defined by sexuality is also not true. The romantic aspects of human engagement with other humans are also included in the LGBTQIA+ spectrum. So to be biromantic is still within that community because you are romantically attracted to or interested in any gender. Panromantic, another one. Homoromantic, if you're only romantically attracted to people of the same gender that you identify as. Heteroromantic, if it's the opposite gender that you identify as. The fact that Matt Walsh doesn't even conceive of the idea that romantic interest in people wouldn't be a part of that is just indicative of the fact that he literally never knows what he's talking about ever. He has no idea. He is a complete void. His brain is like a black hole. It just sucks in a bunch of information and none of it is processed. It's just destroyed and spaghettified. The existence of trans people doesn't deal with sexual attraction. This is also true, yes. Trans people are part of the LGBTQIA+ spectrum, the LGBT trans, because of the fact that they are not heteronormative. They are also going to experience a lot of oppression as a result of that. And also, there's no point in even trying to go through these things, except for the fact that I'm literally trying to do it for the purposes of this video, because the LGBTQIA+ community is not about sexuality by default. It includes romantic attraction. It includes literally anything that isn't heteronormative, really, when it comes to a person's identity, when it comes to their gender identity. Like, the LGBTQIA+ community includes gender identity, sexuality, romantic interest, etc., etc. Does he think transgender is a sexuality? Well, they do. They immediately conflate to be trans with sexuality because they don't understand any of this. To be trans deals with gender identity. There's a difference between gender identity and sexuality. But for some reason, these, two-head fucking losers can't figure that out.
Makes no sense to have them in the club in that case.
Can't believe Matt Walsh is doing ace-phobia. He's doing aphobia on the timeline right now. Matt Walsh, gatekeeping asexuals out of the fucking queer community, even from the people you least expect. You hate to see it.
People are not meant to be asexual and are not asexual.
You think so?
Now, some animal species are asexual, like Komodo dragons and certain species of crayfish, but people...
So humans aren't animals, is what you're saying. I mean, it certainly is true that humans have progressed to a point where they are, by far and away, much more developed, especially intellectually, from other animals. We're still animal. Unless, I guess, you think we're divine, we're beings sent down from heaven by God or whatever, created, which he does. Hello everybody, sorry to rudely interrupt the video you're currently watching, but if you hadn't noticed, we've been experiencing a lot of growth in the channel recently, and we're very close to 25,000 subs. And I thought it would be super cool, not only as a way to get to know the new subscribers that have found me, mostly from the Jaden Animations community, but from others, by doing a Q&A. I wanted to do a Q&A all the way back when I was not even at 1,000 subs, but there wasn't enough questions for me to really care about, and I got bored of the idea. But this time around, I can almost guarantee there will be a lot of cool questions that'll be asked and for me to answer. So I'm down to do it this time, and 25K seems like more of a landmark achievement, because 25 more after that, we get to 50,000, and then so on. So essentially, you can ask me anything, but I will choose what questions I want to answer. It can literally be anything. It could be about my hobbies or interests, my politics, literally whatever else. But like, if I can't give a good answer, I won't answer it. If it's inappropriate, I won't answer it. In general, don't ask me weird fucking questions. But I mean, I'm just not going to answer them. There's going to be 4 different ways that you could give me questions that I will select from. So for one, the YouTube community tab. If you didn't know, on mobile and also desktop, there's a little tab here that says community. There will be a post that I will make like these. Instead of a meme, it'll be here is the post you can put questions on. I'm going to do this for Twitter as well. I'm also going to do it in the Discord. I'll have a separate text channel for people to put questions in there. You could also direct message me on Patreon, and I'll also take questions from there as well. And those questions will have a little bit more priority because you're spending money to be able to do it. Now, that shouldn't be the reason why you become a patron. You should become a patron because you have extra money to spend and you'd like to continue to support the channel, but it's also a nice benefit I figured I'd do because I literally provide nothing else on the Patreon. So it won't be streamed, by the way. I'll be recording my answers to all these questions off stream. I'd like it to be a YouTube exclusive piece of content, so stay tuned for that. The editing of it might be kind of cool as well. I've got some ideas. It also might just me be sitting here in the normal space. I don't know. It really all depends. Oh, also, if you happen to be in my Twitch or website chats, there will also be a command where you can get a link to every single place you can ask a question. So there's that as well. Goodbye.
What we call asexuality would more properly be characterized as a low libido or a disinterest in romantic relationships.
So this is mental illness on display here. This is a person who has shut his brain off from actual knowledge. There are asexual people out there that do have a libido. In fact, you would imagine one of the things that makes a person experience a lot of discomfort, right? Like, if there's a person who doesn't have a desire for sexual engagements with other people, but they have a high libido, meaning that they're horny a lot or whatever, you would imagine that would cause them a lot of mental strife and anguish. They would make it kind of like conflicting in their own mind, and it would be hard to reconcile. There are also asexual people that still engage in sexual activity with other people. Like the example I gave before by the person who would only have sex with a person if they have a strong romantic connection to that person. Or there might be asexual people in relationships with others that aren't asexual, but still have sex because they understand that their partner enjoys that and are okay with doing that for them, and might even derive more of an interest because they're doing it with their partner whom they enjoy. So already we don't understand what we're talking about. As always, because we're watching a Matt Walsh video, and I don't know that the man has literally ever been correct. I don't know that he's correctly identified that the sky is blue. I don't know that he's correctly identified that water is wet. It's really a difficult mental quandary every time Matt Walsh puts out a video.
It is rather a dysfunction of the brain, which may be due to hormonal problems or some sort of mental illness or trauma suffered earlier in life. You know, it could be a lot of reasons for it. Or perhaps, and I think this is the most common, it could also be a symptom of spiritual despair. Some people...
It's kind of kinky, if you ask me, if you really think about it. Matt Walsh's line of thought here is a little bit kinky, like, oh, you're in a fallen state, you're in spiritual despair because you don't experience a sexual desire for another person. Why are we bringing God into this? I don't know, that's a little weird, man. A symptom of spiritual despair. So like, the idea is that if this asexual person just found God and understood religion, then they would suddenly start having sexual urges to other people. So essentially, religion makes you horny. Is that, you know, that might be the case for Matt Walsh. I don't know. I mean, considering what we hear going on in the Catholic Church and whatnot, I don't know. You might actually be correct.
People have given up on human relationships because they've decided that they're not worth the cost or the effort.
If the person says they're biromantic, literally definitionally, to be biromantic means you haven't given up on forming relationships with other humans, you fucking idiot. What are you talking about? We've been ignoring the biromantic part this whole time, mostly because it completely just shows even more how little this guy knows about anything he talks about. To be biromantic necessarily means that this person still has an interest in forming relationships with other humans in a non-platonic sense, but even then, if it's an aromantic, asexual person, that person is still forming relationships with others, just usually platonically, you know, with platonic friends or with family. That hopefully all of your relationships with your family are platonic. I fucking hope so, Matt Walsh. I don't know what he's doing behind closed doors, but I would certainly hope they're platonic. I will never understand this idea that asexual people, they're just not forming relationships with others, just antisocial. They don't talk to other people. And it's mostly just because Matt Walsh understands that every time that he talks to another woman, the natural endpoint of that is that he wants to have sex with that woman. And, you know, he can't really figure out why that is. He paints this broad picture. Whereas for me, I can see another human and not feel any sexual desire to that person. Like, that's possible for me. Like, I'm looking at one right now. Like, this is a visually repulsive person on my screen currently that I'm looking at. I can do this without having any kind of sexual intent. But for some reason, Matt Walsh thinks that normal people, when they look at others, they're thinking about sex immediately. I don't know, man. The idea that asexual people can't form relationships with others is ludicrous.
And whatever the cause of this affliction, it's not an identity. It's bizarre and self-limiting.
Wait, how is it not? How is it not a part of a person's identity that they don't experience a sexual desire for other people or limited versions of that? How is that not? That's definitionally part of one's identity. So if we go over Matt Walsh's identity, as far as he tells us anyway, he is heterosexual, meaning that he experiences a sexual interest in people that identify as the opposite gender that he does. He also, I would imagine, is heteroromantic. These are parts of his identity, necessarily. The fact that he has a wife literally tells people that without having to say anything to him. Like, you hear about Matt Walsh, you know nothing about him. Then you hear that he has a wife, well, then you intuit that, oh, that person's probably either bisexual or heterosexual, and either bi or heteroromantic. We already understand these elements of his identity, but I guess it's just the case that, you know, in his fucking delusional version of reality that he's trying to indoctrinate everybody else with, including your kids, he thinks that, oh, well, no, but that's normal, so it's not part of my identity because that's what's expected. That's normal, which is just a foolish and anti-intellectual way to view it. Is not wanting to have sex a disease now? Probably what Matt Walsh thinks, since that must be why women won't be with him. Well, I mean, yeah, it's probably true. But to be fair, he does have a wife. Somehow, some way, God rest her soul.
It's bizarre and self-limiting to find your whole identity in your sexual attraction, but it's even more...
Yeah, they don't, because they say they're biromantic, you fucking idiot. What do you mean? Biromantic is completely divorced from sexuality, literally from the name, romantic. It literally only refers to romance, not sexuality. Now, your romance, your romantic interests often do correlate to your sexuality, but they don't always have to. This idea that, like, because somebody is asexual, or because somebody is gay, or because somebody is trans, they're making their gender and their sexuality their entire identity is also foolish. And the reason why, for anybody who's curious, like genuinely curious, the reason why there are a lot of people that are very out, proud, and about the fact that they are gay or trans or whatever else is because it is an element of normalization. They're trying to make it so that people understand that these people exist, they're not hurting anybody, and it's a fine thing to be. It is normal to be gay, to be trans, or whatever else. Now, in Matt Walsh's version of reality and what he's trying to make reality, it's not normal to be those things, but it actually is normal. Like, there is no data to suggest that it is harmful to anybody to be any of these identities that I've listed. The LGBTQIA plus spectrum, completely normal. So the reason why people have pride for those things is an effort for normalization, to make it so that other people that might not understand that they're of any like flavor of the LGBTQIA plus spectrum learn more about it. They're like, oh, this person is gay? I didn't think that was possible, but now it kind of explains some of the feelings that I've had in the past that I wasn't able to explain before. Or, oh, that person is trans? Huh. Well, I've always kind of had these feelings that I didn't know how to reconcile, but now that kind of makes sense to me. This is the idea. The reason why the right wing bristles at this, the reason why they get triggered over the fact that people are willing to do that, is because they don't want the normalization, obviously. Like, that's the entire conservative project, is to regress back to the point where black and brown people were slaves, women were property of their fathers and husbands, and white men were the dominant force in society. It's what they want. But that's not what people by and large want. This is why acceptance of LGBTQ people has gone up over time. And normalization is an effort that helps in that, and that's why they don't like it.
Bizarre and far more limiting to find your identity in your lack of attraction. You are finding your sense, your sense of self in the absence of something.
No, because they still talk about how they're biromantic. So they do have the absence of sexual attraction, though. To what degree, we don't know. And I don't really care to know unless the person wants to tell people, because I don't care that this Disney executive is a biromantic asexual. I do not care. I don't know why anybody would. It's just like, oh, I hear this, and it's like, wow, that's a human being. Okay? I don't know what you want from me. But, like, they literally talk about how they have a romantic attraction to people. In fact, more people than we assume Matt Walsh does, because we assume he's hetero-romantic. Like, this person is experiencing more romantic attraction than you are, or at least the potential for it. I don't understand. Like, I don't get it. Also, this person, I'm pretty sure their entire identity is not based around this either. I don't know anything about them, but I imagine they have other interests, other hobbies. They have literally a job as a Disney executive. They've got a variety of things that they do in their life, I would imagine, that aren't just limited to these things.
This is no way to become a fully formed and stable human being.
Yeah, the absolute picture of a fully formed and stable human being, Matt Walsh. We're looking at him. You may not like it, but this is what peak delusion looks like.
But wait a second. She says that she's not only asexual, but also biromantic.
Okay, now we're getting to the other part of it. What does that mean? Well, I'll explain it to you very clearly, as if you're a fucking child, because that's what your mental state and what you've said is currently giving me the vibes of. This is not a fully formed human being in Matt Walsh. This person is woefully, woefully undereducated. Biromantic means that a person can have a romantic interest in more than just the opposite gender that they identify as. They can have a romantic attraction to people that are the same gender as they are. They can have a romantic attraction to the people who are the opposite. Or just any other gender identity they can have a romantic attraction to. Very simple. So to put it even more simply, this person can love women. This person can love men. This person can love non-binary people. I don't know. I feel like that's pretty easy to figure out.
In reality, romantic means something that is characterized by love and affection towards another person.
Okay.
This is the dictionary definition. And we have to understand love in this context to be the erotic form of love.
Wait, why? What the fuck? Why does love, when it comes to romance, necessarily have to be the erotic form of it? What? What are you talking about? This is very sus. What does this mean, man? This man is down bad. He is down catastrophic. He thinks that if you love somebody in a romantic sense, it necessarily has to be erotic. What? For what reason?
That's what romantic love is. That's why you would hopefully say...
No, that's not what a romantic love is. That is counterfactual. This is not actually true. Romance and romantic attraction are, in fact, divorced from sexual attraction. Now, it is the case that they often overlap and correlate to each other, so a homoromantic person likely will also be homosexual, but they don't always have to be. Really strange.
You love your mother, but you would even more hopefully not say that when you go out to dinner with your mother, it's a romantic dinner.
Wait, I wasn't even gonna talk about this. I wasn't even gonna bring this up because I didn't think he was this fucking stupid. So now he's trying to differentiate between a romantic love and a platonic love. So the love of family, which is hopefully platonic, though I don't know what the fuck Matt Walsh is up to. And then a love of your, your partner, which in this case we assume is to be also involved in more than platonic things. To be romantically involved in somebody is more than platonic. So I don't feel the need to bring this up. When I think about romance, I think about romantic desire for another human being, and that usually entails more than platonic engagements. It only starts involving sexuality once you move further past the romance. So yeah, Wired Wolf in chat goes from platonic to romantic to sexual. It's usually in that way. That's the normal expectation, let's say. Romantic love, you can hold hands with someone and that's a romantic activity. Is that necessarily a sexual activity? Are you doing a sex act if you're with your partner in public and you're holding their hand while walking down down the street? I don't think so. If you hug a person and you're romantically interested in that person, is that now sexual? In this way, I mean, you're doing sex acts all the time, even in public. And I don't know, I would wager to guess that Matt Walsh has held his wife's hand in public. And in that way, he's done a sex act in public, likely around children. I don't know about that one, man. You might want to like relook at these definitions, you know, how they logically extend to other things, because that's fucking weird. I don't think anybody holds the standard because nobody is as delusional as Matt Walsh, ideally, hopefully, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but
These are the same. Erotic, sexual, romantic. These are all synonyms.
no.
They belong.
No, they're not. That's why they're different words. These are the people that are like, oh my God, why do we have to have all these different words for all these different things? Why is the left constantly redefining things? Oh, no, like, bruh, you're literally redefining what romance means. Like, why would we have all of these different words as synonyms if they all mean the same thing? It's because there are differences in how these things interact with each other.
So how can somebody be romantic? More than that, biromantic, meaning that they have romantic attraction to both sexes, and yet also at the same time be asexual.
Biromantic doesn't only just mean both gender identities, man, woman. It can also include non-binary people. It could also include agender people. It can include a variety of different gender identities. There are some people that might only be, exclusive to either of the binary genders, but that's not always the case and often isn't the case. But this is just more, gatekeeping from the rad lib Matt Walsh.
Well, they can't is the answer.
You're completely
One
wrong.
of the latest LGBT innovations is to draw this incoherent bifurcating line between romantic and sexual. But the distinction, just like the distinction between sex and gender, is meaningless. Romantic and sexual are the same thing.
This is contrary to just standard basic sociological concepts, just by the way. Like the people that do the science to understand these things disagree with this, this fool on the screen right now.
They're characterized the same way. If you're not romantically attracted to somebody, then you're not sexually attracted to them. If you are romantically attracted to them, you're sexually attracted to them.
Careful, Matt. You might be walking down a winding path that might lead you to some really weird shit. I don't know. This is a little strange. This is a little strange to me. That's all I'm saying. Matt Walsh, a little sus. Little sus.
There is no legible distinction between the two. And yet the LGBT activists draw one anyway.
Delusion.
This is their game. It never ends.
Absolutely
they never
delusional.
stop their assault on language and logic.
Oh my God. He's a sleeper cell, okay? He is in deep cover currently. If you're gonna bitch and moan about, the left, they'll never stop their assault on logic and the definitions of words. Bro, you're literally in the business of redefining words. In this way, you're doing the left's work for them. I don't understand. Like, you're a fucking imposter. You're a little sus in many ways, apparently. I wanted to add this on. I'm recording this again, obviously, on another stream. For some reason, Matt Walsh seems to think that romance and sexual intent are intrinsically tied, because in this video, he's talking about, this Disney executive is saying that they're biromantic asexual, and he thinks that's a contradiction because he thinks that you can't have romance without sex, which is just a really weird and almost perverted view of romance. Like, he's sexualizing romance. This idea that you can't have romance without sex is really fucking weird. There's no reason why romance has to be sexualized, and this idea that it does just tells you a lot about Matt Walsh's worldview and how he interprets his engagements with his fellow human beings, especially for his case, the members of, a gender that isn't his, specifically in this case, women. Kind of sus. Not good.
All coherent concepts have to be broken down, torn to shreds, blended together, and turned into a jumbled smoothie of meaningless contradictions. And that's why ultimately
Says the
today,
conservative.
we thought I was going to cancel Disney, but we already canceled them. So instead, in a much more specific sense, we are canceling biromantic asexuals. Can't really be canceled, I guess, because they don't exist, but even so.
No, they can't be canceled because you don't know how to define them. You don't know what they are. How could you cancel a thing that you don't know what it is? This doesn't make any sense. You've got no idea. Anyway, this is about as much as you can expect from the absolute mentally ill delusions of this man. It's par for the course for, your standard conservative pundit on the internet. I definitely hope that the average, conservative who isn't doing this propaganda as a way to indoctrinate people into their death cult aren't thinking this way and might be able to learn more about these topics. If you've watched this video, hopefully the information I've been able to give you without a team of producers creating this video for me, maybe you've learned a little bit that way. It's very simple. Asexual people, they're not hurting nobody. We're not hurting for people right now, and even if everybody became asexual and then suddenly we need to start producing babies, people can still have sex even though they don't have an interest in it for the purpose of procreation. That's what Matt Walsh's wife did with him as well. He understands this, but for some reason he's pretending not to, and I don't get it. So I'm recording this now on a different day. As you can see, I'm in a different outfit and all this kind of thing. I wanted to add to this segment a couple things. Today on Twitter, I noticed a certain somebody that this entire video is at. It's Matt Walsh. It's Matt Walsh. So this absolute reprehensible ghoul has decided to do a stochastic terrorism and advocacy for violence almost. At least that's what people could read into this. And it seems like his audience is more or less primed to do so. Like I've said before in a previous video, the Why Are Conservatives Attacking Children video, many people who have done violent acts have credited people like Ben Shapiro, Lauren Southern, etc., for inspiring them in some way to do the violent act that they did. And I warned about this in that video. And here's just another one of them. So Mr. Matt Walsh here, one of the pioneers of the whole groomer, every LGBTQIA plus person and their allies is a groomer, quote unquote, narrative. He's been pushing that for a long time. I think he was one of the major elements of that way back before it was the major thing we're all forced to talk about now. He wrote on Twitter, quote, "The groomers are killing children, which is a very strong charge with no substantive evidence whatsoever. They are fostering a massive identity crisis in an entire generation of kids. No, they're not. They're being taught basic biological and sociological concepts in the sterile setting of a classroom." Obviously, Matt Walsh, his education was woefully inadequate because he doesn't understand the difference between biological or sociological concepts, and he doesn't understand even very basic ones that even kids are able to understand, but... Continuing in a decade or two, there will be a wave of suicides unlike anything humanity has ever seen as these kids come of age and begin to understand what's been done to them. So, quote unquote, what's been done to them is that they learned more about standard concepts as it pertains to things that you're taught in school, like biology and sociology. So this is just baseless fear-mongering with absolutely no substantive evidence. Like, literally, like, this is the source. This is Matt Walsh's work cited right here. Because there's nothing. There's nothing here. There's no substantive evidence to prove anything that he's saying. It is literally just stochastic terrorism. So if you're a Matt Walsh fan and you read this, and the entire Republican Party and conservatives have been priming you to think of literally all LGBTQIA plus people and their allies even, you know, you cishets out there, you're not safe either from these accusations if your allies are so-called quote-unquote groomers, and you think that they're, you know, hurting kids or grooming them or doing abuse or whatever, and then he goes on his public platform to say they're killing children with no substantive evidence. Well, what do you do to people that are killing children? What's the recourse there? Like, you call the police? Well, the police aren't going to do anything because there's no actual crime being committed. Well, do you call, what do you do? Like, at a certain point, it's only just vigilante shit, really. If somebody is hearing that children are being killed, how do you expect them to react? Probably, one, very emotionally, when you're being propagandized to in this way. Two, violently, more than likely. We've had stories in the past of people who have shot up like abortion clinics or attempted to shoot up abortion clinics because of the right-wing propaganda of, oh, they're killing babies and whatever else, right? It's the same idea. As it always has been, anytime the right wing decides to weaponize the humanity of oppressed people for votes, hate crimes end up happening more. They're very aware of this, and in fact, they're kind of okay with it. Because they cannot directly go around and do these hate crimes, they decide to push this propaganda, these lies that are completely baseless, as a method to inspire other people to do that dirty work for them. It's insidious, it's disgusting, and this should not be allowed on Twitter's platform. I've reported this tweet because it should not be on the platform. The logical extension of somebody seeing this who isn't of sound mind, which it's a Matt Walsh tweet, so his entire audience is not of sound mind, it's bad. There's bad outcomes that are going to come from this. So I wrote, "Data suggests that friends, family, and local communities supporting queer kids makes rates of attempted suicide go down. Your ideology makes kids want to kill themselves, but you know this," and he does. So the reason why he's saying, oh, they're killing children, there's going to be a wave of suicides unlike anything we've ever seen, is because he's trying to pull on the so-called 40% narrative of attempted suicides from trans people. And I wanted to go into that a little bit. So like I suggest, supportive community members for trans people and all queer people makes rates of attempted suicide go down. The ideology Matt Walsh pushes and the policy he supports makes those rates go up. His side of the fence is causing kids to even consider the most drastic thing possible, which is taking their own life. And it's not to be toyed around with for fucking clout on the internet. Like, this is not a thing you should do. Taking suicide lightly in any capacity is not a person who is of sound mind. Nobody should be doing that. if you actually have empathy for your fellow man, and if you actually pretend to care about children, you're not going to weaponize the suicide rate that you're citing in rhetoric like this. You would want to try to help them. Now, obviously, because Matt Walsh doesn't understand basic biological, sociological concepts, he apparently never graduated from a freshman in high school level biology class. Either he was being bullied or didn't pay attention, or both. He doesn't understand any of this. He's going to assume that, oh, simply from being trans, that makes you want to kill yourself or whatever. This is actually not true. So if we look at the actual data and studies that have been conducted on the subject, we've got from the UCLA Williams Institute, Suicide Thoughts and Attempts Among Transgender Adults, findings from the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey. We'll go on just to the highlights and data points. They go on to say, from their study, respondents who experienced discrimination or were a victim of violence were more likely to report suicide thoughts and attempts. Respondents who experienced family rejection were also more likely to report attempting suicide. By the way, this is literally what Matt Walsh advocates for. Matt Walsh has, in the past, advocated for if your child comes to you in a very vulnerable moment as a parent, and they're like, oh, I have some questions about my gender identity, you essentially just tell them they're a stupid fucking kid, you don't know shit, do what you're told, and essentially accept my indoctrination of you. You're not allowed to be the person that you are. We're not even going to try to investigate why you have these feelings at all. We're just going to shut your brain off and not even think about it, which is family rejection. If a child genuinely feels that way about their gender identity and they are denied by their family and rejected by their family, they're more likely to attempt suicide. Matt Walsh advocates for policies that lead to kids killing themselves, or at least attempting to do so. Access to gender-affirming medical care is associated with a lower prevalence of suicide thoughts and attempts. Imagine my shock. The data points. 98% of respondents who had experienced 4 instances of discrimination and violence in the past year thought about suicide that year. 51% of them attempted suicide in that year. 13% of respondents who had been denied equal treatment because they are transgender reported suicide attempts in the past year. 6% of those who had not experienced such treatment reported past year attempts. 11% of respondents who had been rejected from their families reported past year suicide attempts. 5% who had not reported them. 30% of respondents who were physically attacked in a public place reported attempting suicide. 7% who were not report. 9% of respondents who wanted but did not receive gender-affirming care reported past year suicide attempts, and 5% who wanted and received it reported it. So what this data suggests is that rates of attempted suicide go down if you follow the medical consensus on the treatment for trans people, and specifically gender dysphoria, which includes puberty blockers and potentially any gender-confirming surgeries, and also aesthetic procedures like hair removal, facial feminization or masculinization surgery, whatever else. If you aren't a reprehensible fucking cretin to trans people, they live better lives and they don't think about killing themselves. However, Matt Walsh understands this. I firmly believe that he actually understands this. But the thing about that is, and I mean, I might not have the data points to back up this claim. This is just my opinion. I think Matt Walsh wants queer people to kill themselves. I think Matt Walsh would like it if he could do it himself, but because he can't, he wants to exacerbate conditions for those people so that they stay in the closet, they don't get access to the treatment that they need to be able to live more fulfilled and better lives, and he wants them to kill themselves. That's the logical extension of his policies and rhetoric. And even with this tweet that he's posted, he's also potentially going to inflame tensions from the people that watch him and provoke them to go out and commit violent acts against these people as well. And not only just against the trans people, like I say, but their allies as well. The groomers is everybody who is even vaguely in support of LGBTQIA plus people. To continue, another data point, this is from the Transpulse Project. It was a study done in Ontario, Canada. I'll link to both of these web pages in the description if you want to look over them yourself. I'm just going to quickly, for the purposes of this segment, look at these figures. So figure number 1, the proportion of trans youth aged 16 to 24 years old in Ontario experiencing positive health and life conditions by level of parental support. So you've got satisfied with life, parents are very supportive, you get a higher level of positive health and life experience. If the parents are somewhat or not at all supportive, you get a lower level. Very good or excellent physical health, excellent mental health, high self-esteem, even intent to parent. So this is a big thing right-wingers will say about gay people, like homosexual people specifically, is that, oh, well, if people are gay, they're not going to make babies, and we gotta have to make babies because they think that somehow we've got a problem with population, which we don't actually. Things are fine. Birth rates are going down, but we're still at a level where we're chilling. And if it did come to the point where, like I've said in previous videos, if we waved a magic wand and made every human being asexual, but they still had to reproduce sexually, they would would probably still have sex to continue the prolonging and survival of the species. I have more faith in humanity than Matt Walsh, maybe. But anyway, the intent to parent even goes up when the parents of these trans youth are more supportive. So like, even if that's a problem that you have, following Matt Walsh's rhetoric and policy and ideology makes them less likely to want to be parents. Their experience of adequate housing skyrockets as well. No shit. If a trans youth has very supportive parents, they're not going to get kicked out of their homes. They're not going to be subject to child abuse, like what Matt Walsh advocates for when it comes to trans youth. However, if they are somewhat or not at all supportive of the parents, well, now you've got more people experiencing inadequate housing. Imagine my shock. To carry on, and like I say, I'll link this in the description if you want to see more later. Figure number 2, the proportion of trans youth aged 16 to 24 in Ontario experiencing negative health and life conditions by level of parental support. So same as the last time, parents very supportive is in the dark blue, light blue, somewhat or not at all supportive. Depressive symptoms. Rates of depression go down when parents are very supportive and skyrocket when they're not. Considered suicide in the past year, 34 to 70 here of respondents. People will consider suicide less if parents are very supportive. No way. And this is the major one because this is what we're talking about right now. Suicide attempts in the past year. You've got 57% of people responding say they've attempted suicide in the past year if their parents were somewhat or not at all supportive. However, if the parents are very supportive, look at this little number, down to 4%. 4%. If the parents are very supportive, respond saying that they've attempted suicide in the past year. And now you might say, if you're fucking stupid, oh, well, you know, the people who have supportive parents, they're still reporting that they've attempted suicide. Yeah, because they're human fucking beings. Suicidality is a big problem that humans have faced since the dawn of time, before trans people were more or less supported as well, before queer people were more or less supportive. And to elucidate this, let's go on to suicide statistics as reported by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So we're no longer just looking at trans or queer people, but all people, okay? Some suicide statistics. Suicide is the 12th leading cause of death in the United States. In 2020, 45,979 Americans died by suicide. In 2020, there were an estimated 1.2 million suicide attempts. This is all people in the United States that were surveyed here. Or this is actually just the people that have died. So this is reported deaths by suicide, rather, not even people who have reported saying they've attempted but not actually been successful in their attempt. So you've got additional facts about suicide in the United States. The age-adjusted suicide rate in 2020 was 13.48 per 100,000 individuals. The rate of suicide is highest among middle-aged white men. In 2020, men died by suicide 3.88 times more than women. On average, there are 130 suicides per day. White males accounted for 69.68% of suicide deaths in 2020. There are more white males in the country than are trans people, than are queer people. If you really care about stopping suicides from happening, maybe you shouldn't weaponize suicide rates against queer people for political points. As a person with common human decency and empathy, I don't like it when anybody commits suicide because I want people to live the most fulfilled, positive, and great lives they possibly can. And seeing this 70% statistic makes me sick to my fucking stomach, man. I don't want these people to be committing suicide. And you know why they do this? It might be because they're afflicted with emotional problems, physical problems. White men are subjected to a lot of these problems as well. It's not just limited to people who are oppressed, though these people might be oppressed on the basis of class, which a lot of them are. So, you know how we make this rate go down? You know how we make the 70% of white males who accounted for all suicide deaths in 2020 go down? By improving their living conditions, by providing them with mental health care, by providing them standard health care for free or incredibly subsidized by the state, by making it so that people don't have to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Essentially, the way you make the suicide rate go down is by following a progressive left-leaning agenda of policy prescriptions like Medicare for all, like increasing the minimum wage, tying it to the cost of living. There's a myriad of ways that would help these people. But Matt Walsh doesn't like any of those things because they're spooky socialism. Not only does Matt Walsh want queer people to kill themselves and wants to exacerbate the conditions that lead to that happening, he also doesn't give a fuck if white men kill themselves because his policy prescriptions lead to that happening. He doesn't support any of those things. In fact, he is vocally against them. So white men out there, if you follow Matt Walsh, you're not safe either. So I just wanted to go over this. This person is not to be taken seriously literally ever. He doesn't understand basic biology. He doesn't understand basic sociology. He literally lives in a warped version of reality that he's constructed for himself because he can't possibly contend with the one he actually lives in. And he tries to force it on everybody else in order to make himself feel normal. It's really sad. It's coward-like, cuck-like behavior. It's the sign of a weakened, fallen, darkened mind. And it's not good. And I hope that there are people out there that might have been sympathetic to his views that understand the negative consequences of what he supports. This video is CONURE CALLOUT. Zoe Vex. Thanks so much for the support, and hope you continue to enjoy the content. If you'd like to be the next CONURE CALLOUT, all you gotta do is follow me on Twitter @CONURECC, retweet my video links when they go live. Remember to subscribe to the channel, hit all notifications on when you hit the bell. Would appreciate that as well. Leave a like if you'd like, comment something in support of asexual, biromantics, or whatever down below, and have a fantastic rest of your week.